Hi, welcome to the Rob and Bird podcast. I'm Rob.
And I'm Bird. We're here to bring hope and motivation to those in the struggle. We're in it too. We cannot afford to give up.
We're basically cheerleaders. The road to success will be hard, but we want you to know you're not alone.
All right, well, let's get to it, Rob. What do we have diving into today's episode?
Well, first, let's address the elephant in the room. We're here together.
Yes, we're actually here in person for the first time ever. We never met in college.
Nope.
No, like, I never, I didn't ever steal your half sandwich, so that's true. We know that's true. Yeah, yeah. See, he's smiling because he knows it's true. I didn't steal it, so he had a great time.
I'm smiling because I'm in front of a camera.
Yes, yes. So moving on. What is it today? Today's episode 12.
Well, today is episode 12. We decide on discovery, and this is why cameras suck, because we have to do it all in one take.
Yes.
What was it? But there's always something to learn when it comes to art, regardless of what you're doing. Whether it's the craft itself, if you're drawing, you have to learn the different techniques that you would need to go into. I know I had to learn animation when I got into college, and I come from a more life drawing background. Then you do different other kinds of art. If you do guitar, guitar or drums,
Yeah.
you have to learn how to do that. I've written. That's its own art form. So, regardless of what you're gonna do, you're gonna have to learn, and even masters are gonna be learning.
Yeah, I find it funny, like with the term masters, because it's like even when you so-called master something, it really just means you have such a strong grasp of it. People see very little to maybe no flaws in the work that you're putting out there, but still, even those people find themselves to be in a more like a student.
I think
in their craft.
I think good masters are always constantly looking, how can I improve just this little bit? Just this little bit.
Yeah.
And something that I've seen on YouTube probably a few months ago was that there were some master samurai, modern swordsmen, and some YouTuber decided to give these guys who've been training with katanas for much of their lives, gave them an arming sword or a long sword, and they were looking at it. They're trying to figure out, how can I use this? Because there were things that they weren't comfortable with, but then they looked at it and it's like, I understand why you would have this. I understand why you would have that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's like it has a purpose in its own, and once you learn to use the tools, you find the purpose of where it's needed, and when you become like closer to like a masterful level in those cases, you respect the meaning of the tool. You know what I mean? Like, because of what it adheres to, what you need to do and your abilities.
Because there's going to be a endpoint to whatever craft it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
And one of the things is there are multiple ways to get to that objective.
Yeah. And that's the great part, right? It's like on the discovery of finding out that there's multiple ways of getting to that point of where you're trying to reach your goal. It's not just one way or you're screwed. Like the learning process is not like just a paralyzed way. You know what I mean? You know how like some people will try to paralyze others, that they have to learn it this way or else they're not in a club or something like that, and that again, it just paralyzes people from wanting to discover other methods or manners of speaking to that goal or that skill set. And granted, like it kind of reminds me of like the show Legend of Korra. She's the Avatar, of course. She gets sent to learn airbending because that's one of her weaker abilities. She can, but she's just not that good at it. And the airbenders, they all learned how to do it the way that it's been taught for whatever how long, but she just can't learn. She's impatient and she can't tune into that way of learning. She goes out there and they get upset at her because she disobeys the teacher and goes into this like fighting tournament thing and all that stuff where they all use their abilities and they shoot these like earth bending discs and stuff at each other. That's out of nowhere. I think that's where she ends up accidentally kind of learning to use her her air bending abilities, and it pops off, and then they find out she's the avatar in that crowd, even though the airbenders teacher kind of didn't want to get that out there in broadcast, but saw that she learned. She went out on her own way, even though that was a rougher way to do it. That was the way for her to learn. So it's kind of cool, like that how that story goes, because it's kind of teaching people to kind of think, like, yes, this is how most people learn this, but if you can't like try to discover your way there.
Yeah, I know that when I was going to school, there's a proper way to learn something and improper way to learn something, and I didn't learn the subject matters in the traditional way in a lot of cases. And something that my mother told me about in learning when I don't remember this until she reminded me, was that I had a teacher who was trying to explain the theory of the Big Bang, and the teacher like went through the well, this is the scientific research, this is like a verbal description, and then he just threw that away and just
that's it.
That was it. And I was like, oh, I understand. I know what he means now, because and then it all spreads.
Interesting. That's a good way to kind of teach it. I mean, I never had that kind of way of learning the Big Bang and all that, but that's kind of cool.
But there's that expression, multiple ways to skin a cat.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of figuring out how you learn, right?
Yeah, I mean that's the thing that's good about having the ability to be a creative problem solver, because when you open up to the possibility of thinking, you start to think outside the box. And that's when you start making some real moves, I think. But what's tough is, like, I feel like sometimes we've been taught, like, say, not just in school, but in other manners of learning, like, you have to do things this way. And it kind of boxes you in, like, without breaking. You don't want to break the rules. You kind of set yourself in there.
I mean, one of the rules is this is how you write with your right hand drawing. Meanwhile, I'm a lefty, so
yeah. Oh, my wife's a lefty
so I get slapped.
You got slapped for using your left-handed?
Well, I didn't, but
no, I mean, yeah, I know my wife. She's a lefty too, and I jokingly tell her how like I know how to use chopsticks correctly, and she doesn't. She's like, she's awesome though. But yeah, but it's cool because everyone's got their way, the way their brain's wired, and observing things, and some are better listeners than others. Some are better visual learner than others, and some just are more of the quiet, like stay in the back and watch things, and What are you talking about, Rob? You're the one that talks the most. I'm the quiet one.
Yeah.
No, it's the opposite, obviously. But yeah, it also reminds me, it's like another great it was a movie, Ratatouille. How the discovery of the new, where the critic had to face the reality that the talent food that he was getting was from a rat, and they try to explain to him like this is who was cooking his meals, and he was like almost pissed, and like how,
well,
but realized
it was a bit of an existential crisis, because like rats can't cook, they just eat.
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, you have What was the rest? His name was
Remy.
Remy just put it all together.
Yeah.
And then served it up.
Yeah, it was cool because you see near the end when Anton Ego writes his review, and he had to
face that I was wrong about something.
Yeah, and he lost his credibility, all that stuff, but he invested into the Ratatouille restaurant, and still because he had to really support what's true. This is the creature that made that meal that brought him back to his memory of when his mother fed him ratatouille. And if you remember the scene, he was in like that bike and it's broken and he's like staring and his mom goes, oh, like this will make you feel better, kind of without words. You get the sense of that moment, and he eats it, and then it zooms back to the current time where he's this old, tall, skinny critic,
very demanding.
Yeah, and then his face lights up from pale death to life filling in his face and his cheeks, and he's just like, oh, I'm a child again, I'm eating. And that's the thing, the discovery of the new. I mean, that film really did something. I mean, to me, I just love the messaging. It was more about being more open to hear what things are coming from and learn from that and see why it's happening and how it's happening. It was, yeah, I thought that was one great example of like dealing with discovery, even of things that even if it goes kind of against what you've been standing for, you have to be willing to listen and then see, okay, why is this way? And then you learn, but you can still challenge it too if you see flaws within it itself as well. But
I mean, that's how scientific discoveries are. There's a reason why they're all called theories, because it is true until we prove that it isn't true. Like the idea of the sun revolving around the earth. That was true until we proved that it wasn't. And Galileo had to explore why the established sciences were wrong.
Didn't they prove it that I'm the center of the universe, right? You see, I knew I was right. You didn't say anything. You did not challenge it. I win. See that? Thank you. We're on the first date, and it's my birthday. Rob, where's my happy birthday cake?
No cake for
Here's
you.
my birthday. Jesus Christ. All right, because of the half sandwich. Didn't know that talking. He's like, oh, I owe you owe him half sandwiches. Yeah. Moving on. So Discovery. Yeah, I didn't know, but that's the thing. I remember going to SVA too. Like, what I really enjoyed was seeing how animation was done in our school through paper. Remember how like we started our first year, you had to flip through the pages and draw.
It was a new skill that people learned. I hope a lot of our classmates learned a lot from it.
Yeah, I was so ecstatic about learning animation. Still I still learn a lot every time I animate. Like, I liked when I was able, like, I felt like a real animator when they gave us those stack of reams of paper. And we just flipped through the pages.
Yeah, like a lot of the first time you actually animate something, you flip it like a flip book.
Yeah.
And there's something magical about it.
Yeah. It was great, and then I did like with the moment they just gave us like the reams, and then we get it stacked on the light box, and you turn the light switch on, and then you flip it through the pages. You're like, oh snap! I'm like, I'm animating, and it was animating. It was just a ball too. We were just animating a bouncing ball.
Yeah, the bouncing ball. Everyone knows the bouncing balls. The squash and stretch.
Yeah. So I was just like so ecstatic about the whole movement and everything. I was like, man, this is what they did at the studios in those days, before you
have digital, where you can just flip through it automatically.
And it's like not even that, just alone. After that, it's like when you're done with your animation, you take the stack of paper, you make sure you number it, and then you bring it into the pencil test rooms, and then you just like go, oh man, now it's playing. You get to know how to use that.
And then you play around with increase the frame rate, decrease the frame rate, double shots, and just go run it on singles.
Yeah.
See how the flow is.
I forgot. Was it that device called the lunchbox? I think
it's the lunchbox. Yeah.
Lunchbox. Yeah, I thought that was funny because it
Lunch,
looked
yeah,
like a
that's,
lunchbox.
Yeah, because it's just a box, and now you have devices which are more powerful in such a small device.
Yeah. You can just do it on your tablet or on your laptop, your phone even too. That's the cool thing. You can take your animation with you, your work with you, depending on the app you use.
If you have the technology to do it.
Yeah.
Not everyone can, and if you can't, then the old ways still work.
Yeah.
I think that we're in an age where technology advances so fast that we forget that things were done in a particular way.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, you didn't pick up a meal ready where you get a package and then you throw it into the oven and then you would cook it. You would actually have to take a knife and chop up those vegetables and whatever.
Yeah. But going on, with the whole, for me, discovering how the process was like for traditional animation just got me that much, again, like more excited and more invigorated to do animation on paper. But even though then after that, I think second year we started doing all things digitally on CT tablets and screens. And
some of us did. I was still working with pen and paper, or pencil and paper rather.
Oh, you stuck to it?
I kept at it. But you learn more to work on digitally. So I kept drawing. I kept using the light boxes and the light discs rather, and the lunch boxes, not the light boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that there's something to be learned from the old ways that I think is undervalued. I mean, there's a reason why people often go back to this is the techniques on how to draw this or how to smelt that, or there's something to be learned from it.
Yeah, there is a lot. I would say this, like some people, I remember when early on, when they asked me, oh, like how is it animating on paper versus on the Cintiq? Like, do you like the difference, or what's the difference? And my analogy was, the difference is when you're on paper, you're rollerblading on the street. When you're animating on a screen, you're ice skating on ice. When you're drawing, that's the feel. That's the feel that compares in my mind. And then I tell them, like, the thing is with drawing on a Cintiq or a tablet screen, you got to get used to it because it's not natural, like paper.
I mean,
paper
if you're
a bite to it.
If you're used to drawing on paper, it's going to feel so alien. The productivity is obviously going to be better on a Cintiq or whatever drawing tablet you're using, but there's, coming from a more traditional media, there's something about paper that's just solid.
Yeah.
And there's a certain finality to drawing on paper. Even if you start off drawing on paper and you pressed way too hard, the shadows of your mistakes are going to remain.
Yeah, they'll appear, and it's like you can try to erase some stuff, but it's still kind of there. It's funny. It reminds me too, because I know on my thesis film, I had a mix. I sometimes, because I didn't have access to a computer or whatever, Cintiq, I would draw on paper. I had to scan it, and then try to blow out the lines on the paper.
Mm-hmm.
Making the image black and white completely, so I could take off the white space and then keep the black lines remaining. But then there are other ways I would animate on Flash and then color film and then send it out. But I did enjoy it on paper more. It just sucked the process of having to draw on paper, to have to scan it, to have it digitally taken, the drawn. But one thing I remember I wanted to try and I didn't get to, one of our professors at our school he had animation cells. and I wanted it so. But I unfortunately he gave me a couple, but he's like, "You really want to do it?" I was like, "Yeah, I want to try," and I did. I tried a little, but man, it's hard. You have to use a certain type of ink too. I felt because it's plastic.
Yeah,
It doesn't.
it is something completely different.
Yeah, you can't use anything that's close to watercolor type of inking. You have to use more of a permanent marker ink kind of drawing to it.
Maybe there's something that there's a technique or a methodology or some other way of thinking that no one's seen yet. Maybe you can be that person.
Yeah, it's true. It's sometimes it's even better when people start off that way because they're not condoned by rules and stuff.
Yeah, because each person is going to formulate a set of rules in their own head. So
yeah,
I imagine that's why there are some people who go into one field and then they jump to some other ship and try to figure things out because there's more creativity there because you're trying to figure out how do I conform to this standard.
There's different approaches of how the companies deal with oil spills, and one of them was it had a technology where it kind of helped separate the oil, especially heavy oils that are stuck in the water, and even though it separates, but it's able to separate even further, and it filters all of that oil out. It kind of falls into this like inner tunnel pool, and yeah, and it's incredible seeing that there isn't just one method. You know what I mean? Like they didn't just think, oh, that's all we can think of, and because of how we've been taught.
I mean, necessity breeds innovation.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things about art is that it is an excuse to, I mean, it's an excuse and a reason to continue to try to understand a large variety of different things. Like, a lot of people like their swords and sorcery, kind of, right?
Yeah.
But then that leads into a deeper question. How do you use metal stick against other metal sticks, right?
Yeah.
And then so you kind of see the evolution in movies where someone is using a stick kind of how you might expect. But then the deeper you go, there's more mastery to it than just that. I mean, look at, let's say, what was it, John Wick? There's a lot of things going on. Whereas you can just pull out a gun and just bang, 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 right?
Yeah. Just go straight with it.
The choreographers had a certain curiosity about how it could go. It might be extreme. I would say it's extremely fantastical, but there was a certain logic to the madness.
Yeah, there was a purpose to it. It's the way the settings are in that movie too. All the John Wicks, and they're kind of crazy. They're just like, oh, took my dog, and then
yeah. But there's a certain realism in that you're trying to understand what the subject matter is. If you want something to feel authentic, you have to study what the subject matter that you're researching.
Yeah.
Like Mass Effect, it was science fiction, but it tried to theorize things that, does this make sense in this context? What's dark matter? No one knows what dark matter is, but they had to try to figure out certain things that, like, would this make sense if we inputted this? Would this make sense if we had this? Right?
Right.
And every science fiction is in one part science fantasy, and every science fantasy is one part science fiction. That's the whole point. So
yeah,
it's a gradient.
Well, it's funny with science fiction. You can play around with certain like concepts, even though it's based on it's based on science and all that. But you can play around with it with the belief of what something can do when you create something, that isn't real, and mess around with the elements as well in combination to it.
I mean, we don't have Gauss rifles yet, but
Damn.
Someone conceived of the idea of using magnets to hypercharge a projectile to supersonic speeds, and
Yeah.
it gets into wild things
One day, Rob. One day.
because people are curious
Yeah.
and they're taking a theory and throwing out to see if it will work.
When you see people create concept art for like things like World of Worlds and Star Trek,
Actually,
and all that.
that's the thing. You look at Star Trek, where you have the flipping open of the communicators, and then
yeah.
and then years
The
later,
flip phones.
yes, the flip phones. Years later, you have Kirk
Yeah.
with a Motorola just flipping,
Yeah.
and like everyone's snapping the picture. It's like
It's
he
awesome.
just opened up the communicator.
Nice. Yeah. I wouldn't even mind, dude. If that was a phone, I would actually buy it. And I'm not a hardcore Star Trek fan, but I'm interested. I get it. I get caught into it. And then the stories you tell me about certain character moments, where they reach certain peaks in conflict. But the whole idea of the technology, like if you think about it, Star Trek is one of those mediums that really push, even though it's about discovery. It's about discovery and going out traveling in space. But then they had all this tech. And when you saw it, it just kind of looked cool. It's like a nerd bling, like in my head, and
But I think that people forget that people don't understand that Star Trek isn't about the technology. It was a canvas for which the writers would paint a canvas of a human soul. Because you look at it, it's not about discovering this next. I mean, to a degree, it was, but it was more about what is right, what is wrong. It was the exploration of how a culture might grow to be something wrong, something that we don't like, but there's a certain logic to it. There was the episode of the aliens that one side of their face was black and the other side was white, and there was the discussion of where, of course, he's a bad person because look at his face, he's black on this side and he's white on this side, and the crew of the Enterprise didn't understand it, but in their logic, it was the case. And it was an exploration of the darker sides of human nature, as well as the virtues.
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of it was a more real issue that happened. It was I think if I'm not wrong, it was like a child in a village was left to there out to his own devices because they felt the family was cursed. But then a woman saw that and gave him water and picked him up and kind of just thought this is not right, but she comes from a different world, culture. She took care of this child and brought him up and actually got him to go to school to learn to be better. And these people in the village kind of looked at it like nuts because they just didn't know, like that's what they knew of what right and wrong was in that realm. And in her other realm was like, no, I can see past that. This is not fair, and gave this kid a chance to live. And I heard he's been doing great and growing up. And I also remember too, it's like a Star Trek episode. I think it was the one with Picard, and their head of security was a woman, and they met a race, and this race of guys were like, "You have a woman, just running your guns and stuff," and they're like, "Yeah," and she had to prove herself. Where she wrestles one of them, I think, or challenges him.
She
one
flips
of them.
him.
Flips him, yeah. And they kind of impressed. They're like, "Oh, okay," It changed. It's like they weren't exposed to the idea of that, and it's not like I would go, "How dare they?" It's more like they just didn't know well enough to see past what they saw as strength or whatever. That it's supposed to be men supposed to be doing this role, and then. She was proving to them that's not really the case. It's not supposed to be thinking that way, I guess.
Everyone thinks that their way is the way, and there's a certain arrogance and it's not an obvious, blatant arrogance, that whatever moralities I have, someone else must obviously have it. But not everyone does.
And not everyone shares it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's why Bert and I, we're New Yorkers. We've been exposed to a number of different cultures in New York. And you start appreciating people have different moralities, people have different values.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can be hard to balance that because everyone just have different ideas on what right and wrong is.
Yeah, I would say like the great thing is that we learn from each other, Rob. Like as we discuss our values and our differences and how we view situations, and we challenge each other's perception and point of view. Say like of certain things that someone says or something we see on the news or something, and what's like for me, I would say was what I'm very thankful is that I was brought up to think curiously, to not just hang out with what I know and learn and go be around with things I know, kind of delve out and discover something new, something different. And that's how I was very, I'm very extroverted. I went to you in school and I went to other students because I saw what you guys were doing and I was curious. Do we have a lot in common? I don't know, but I decided to jump in anyways. I didn't care, like, oh, you have to look a certain way.
Well, we didn't know if we had anything in common then.
Yeah.
But we got to know. I was like, Bird likes Star Wars. I like Star Wars. I'm more of the original trilogy. Bird is a bit more sympathetic with the prequels.
Yeah. What's wrong with Jar Jar Binks? No kidding. Yeah, me and Rob, we have our differences and our values, but we also, when we talk, we try to discover what might be missed or what can be found in certain discussions of the topics that we're in, and kind of build from there and have a better perspective knowledge onto the subject. And as of right now, like about the talk of discovery, I think it's very important that what you're pursuing and what we've been pursuing, as you're into your writing and I'm into my short animation, you have to discover something new when you can and be unafraid to go out there and find out what's on that side. Of course, be cautious, be careful. You can't just go in there blindly all the time and take risks every time. It can cost you way more than you can afford. But to be still and not have a mindset, that doesn't want to go out and discover something, but then you yearn or want something, you're not going to obtain it by looking at it at a distance or not trying to figure out what you must do to discover it. And that is what makes it, if anything, for me, my life journey, much more interesting and fun, because I got myself to get off my seat and go, I'm going to go find out more about what's out there in life and not just what I see in front of me alone.
It's also good character development if you're into writing like I am. It's important to actually humanize the villain. That doesn't mean that you make the villain a good guy. By no means am I saying that.
Yeah.
What I mean is there's usually a reason, not just twirling one's mustache and declaring oneself as, aha, I'm evil. I'm going to throw this woman onto the tracks. It's like, how many people actually do that?
No. Yeah.
There's
just the insane ones. But yeah, I know what you're
I mean,
saying.
there are people who do that, but they're not interesting either.
Yeah, the ones that I think, yeah, you're right, because it's like you want the ones that are in the stories, the ones you can't seem to find. They have much deeper, well hidden methods.
Well, I don't
like
even mind villains that are like they are villains, but they have to have something in which they say, I'm not a villain. There's a saying from Star Trek by Gul Dukat, who is a villain. One man's villain is another man's hero. Because the difference between the hero and the villain is whose side wins. I mean, even traditionally, hero just means someone who's done something great. That doesn't mean that they're morally righteous. I mean, what's his name? Achilles. Achilles was not a good person, but he was a hero.
Till you got shot in the Achilles foot.
Heel.
Keel. Oh, yes. Whoops. I read my history.
Well, it'd be mythology.
No. Yeah, I just think of that as an artist, I can only speak in terms of discoveries that it's always good to try things that you haven't tried before artistically. And also, what helps also is what enriches an artist is doing, say, for example, if you're going to animate a dog, try to be around, like, if you can, like at a pet store or something, or a friend who has a dog.
Be with dogs. If
Yeah.
you, whatever it is that you're interested in, hang around there.
Yeah.
Like, if you're interested, if you want to hear, well, maybe you don't want to do this, but if you are writing a song about warfare, maybe go to a reenactment instead of actually going to a conflict zone. Go to a reenact or paintball.
Yeah,
or
paintball.
Yeah.
Yeah. They when you go, there's some places that kind of reenact scenes too in paintball places and stuff. I've heard of that, and it's kind of nuts.
And that's regardless of who the characters are, what the topic is. Try to understand it instead of, because there was a person who was, I remember, I've mentioned this before, who had a film idea, was very much, had a political agenda, had something that she wanted to say. And she did say it, but no, and it was very beautifully done. Everyone hated it though, because there was no humility.
That can happen, yeah.
Because you just flat out say, you don't agree with me, therefore you're evil. Maybe understand why the person who is evil. Because there is more depth to a person's villainy than just a curly mustache.
Yeah. It's surface level thinking and anything, because you're not going deeper beyond it to really emphasize why. And it's important to know, because then people can really go, okay, I get it. Why they have that stance. Not just because you have that stance, you think they're wrong, and if anyone disagrees, they're wrong too. And it just separates you from, it disconnects you from others that, you know what I mean? Like, that would see otherwise.
Otherwise, Galileo would be saying the sun revolves around the earth.
Yeah. Or me. Yes. I'm twirling my make-believe mustache right now. But anyhow, just want to say thank you for listening, everyone. And, yeah, really appreciate you all.
Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to see a newer world. Push off, and sitting well, in order smite the sounding furrows. For my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the baths of all the western stars until I die. Alfred Tennyson, Ulysses.
And that, my friends, is Discoveries episode 12. We hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening. Like if you really like it. Subscribe if you want to hear more episodes. Comment as well if you like, or what you'd like to hear more from us. Thank you so much for your time.